Tonight on The Wrap. Sky News challenges the US military over claims that an American missile killed more than 120 children at a school in the Iranian city of Minab on the opening day of the Iran war.
Admiral Mark Stone from Sky News. Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Hey, how you doing?
Investigations.
Investigations on.
For how long can you hide behind an investigation is ongoing, sir? We have a team in Minab right now. They have seen what happened. They have seen no evidence of a Iranian missile base there. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is happening, sir?
The government waters down sanctions on Russian oil to allow diesel and jet fuel of Russian origin to be imported into the UK. Ministers revealed that the cost of HS2 could now exceed £100 billion, but that cancelling it would cost more than letting it go ahead. Plus, yes, joy in North London as the Arsenal are crowned Premier League champions after a 22-year wait. Well, we discuss today's biggest stories with the journalist and broadcaster, Sonia Soda, and the political commentator, Adam Bolton. Plus a first look, of course, at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including the government asking supermarkets to cap prices on staple foods. Well, hello, good evening. Sonia and Adam, welcome to you both as well. So let's begin tonight with those images from North London. What are we talking about? Let's have a look. Arsenal fans celebrating winning the Premier League for the first time since 2004. Manchester City's 1-1 draw against Bournemouth means Mikel Arteta's side can't be caught at the top of the table. Well, we've just had these pictures in, actually, of Arsenal's squad celebrating the win.
And then you get this moment.
Yes, we'll be live at the Emirates Stadium with our sports correspondent Rob Harris a little later in the programme as those celebrations go on into the night. And Adam actually revealing he's actually an Arsenal fan, aren't you, Adam?
Yeah, but I mean, the feeblest of Arsenal supporters. You know, at junior school you had to support a team. I'm a Londoner. I've always supported the Gunners, so great for them. And I have to say, I do think they have been underpriced throughout this season, that you've tended to get people talking about Manchester City and elsewhere, and this is diligence rewarded. They run up in recent seasons, and now they pulled it off. And it, of course, comes at a time when Pep Guardiola, the manager of Manchester City, has announced that he's going to be moving on. So it's pretty much the end of an era, and probably that end of an era of Manchester City dominance. And that is about all I know about football.
Well done, although I see it's already on the front pages. That was a quick turnaround for some of them, wasn't it? Yes, Manchester City needed 2 wins, did not get it on the night. No doubt there'll be more celebrations, and we'll certainly go to Rob Harris, who's on his way to the Emirates right now. But back to that shortly. Now, Sky News has tonight challenged the US military over claims that a missile which killed scores of Iranian children on the opening day of the Iran war was fired by America. Last night, we brought you eyewitness reporting from the scene of the strike on a school after Sky's Dominic Waghorn became the first international journalist to reach the city of Minab since the conflict began.
This is actually quite overwhelming. Child after child, grave after grave, and almost 3 months on, the families still coming every evening to spend hours by their children's graveside. And talking to some of them, of course, is deeply moving.
Well, despite an initial assessment by US officials that the United States had carried out the attack, the US government is still to admit responsibility. Well, today, the top US military leader in the Middle East was pressed in Congress on why it was taking so long.
The United States does not deliberately target us.
Got that part.
Period. Full stop. And nor are the Iranian people our enemy. The IRGC is the adversary in this case.
I heard that in your opening statement, Admiral. I asked you a very specific question, and I'm curious what the answer is.
So the investigation is ongoing. As soon as it is complete, I'm happy to be as
So that's a
transparent as
no.
possible.
We will not take responsibility
and
for something we very obviously did.
Sir, it's a complex investigation. The school itself is located on an active IRGC cruise missile base.
Absolutely.
It's more complex than the average strike. As soon as we're complete, I'm fully committed to transparency, given your important oversight role and the other members here.
Just so you know, and I have an enormous amount of respect for you and an enormous amount of respect for the Pentagon, I do not trust that answer. What we've seen out of the Secretary of Defense and his callous disregard for any sort of rules of engagement or protecting civilian life may make us suspicious. And that's the only second question I have for you. Do you think it's ever appropriate for anybody in a leadership position to use the words "no quarter" when describing how we are conducting our operations in Iran?
Sir, I think it's appropriate as military leaders. We follow the law of armed conflict and our constitutional responsibilities, and that's what we've done.
And you would agree that no quarter is not following the law?
I would agree it's our constitutional responsibility to follow the law.
Well, as he left that evidence session, Admiral Cooper was challenged by our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
Admiral Mark Stone from Sky News. Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Manab?
Hey, how you doing?
Investigations ongoing. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is ongoing, sir? We have a team in Manab right now. They have seen what happened. They have seen no evidence of a Iranian missile base there. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is happening, sir? When will the investigation conclude? Admiral, can you tell us when the investigation will conclude? Can you say anything to the families who died in Manab, sir?
Well, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, is in Manab, where that strike took place. This was his reaction to the comments by Admiral Cooper.
We have to listen very closely to what the Admiral said there, because he was answering this question pretty disingenuously. Pretty painful listening to Admiral here sort of wriggling under congressional cross-examination and not answering the question. The question was America behind the attack on this school that killed at least 150 people, 120 of them children, and he said America does not target civilians. That is not the question he was asked to answer, as he was reminded, and he simply wouldn't answer that question, which will, I think, add to the frustration of people here who say that for almost 3 months now they've wanted answers, and America will simply not do what it's done in the past in Iraq and Afghanistan, where when all the evidence is stacking up against it, these were American-made Tomahawk missiles. That morning the Americans were targeting a number of targets in the area. With all that evidence against them, why not just say what they've done in the past, which is, yes, we were behind it. It was a mistake. We're now trying to work out why. We've been to the school a number of times this week, and I can categorically tell you it is a school, or was a school. It's now a pile of rubble. It is not a missile base. It's not on a missile base. It's been a school for at least 10 years. It's marked on maps, has been marked on maps for at least 10 years as a primary school. If you look at it from satellites, you'll see playgrounds, you'll see the markings of football pitches as well. A lot of the kids there, we've spoken to their parents, were soccer mad. So you could see it was a primary school. And we've spoken to, as I say, parents, teachers, nurses, children as well, and we've asked most of them, because there were and have been these reports that it was near or part of a military base. You know, has it been, or is it anywhere near a military base? Have you seen any evidence of military activity? And they've all said no. Now, there are some maps that show it is adjacent to or close to buildings that there are some reports linking to the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and some of those buildings may have connections or may have had connections with the IRGC. But I can categorically tell you that nowhere near the school that we've been to and filmed for almost a week is there any evidence of military activity. It's certainly not on an active IRGC military base, unless that's a bunker deep underground, which I think we would know by now, because there's a big crater in the middle of this school caused by cruise missiles. So it looks like this school was tragically misidentified. I think we have to assume that it wasn't deliberately targeted as a school. That is not what the US military has ever done. But if it was misidentified, that is equally potentially a breach of the rules of war. So these are very grave allegations against America, and it is not a complex question to answer. Did you hit this school deliberately, or did you do it by mistake? And what is completely baffling is why it's taken America almost 3 months still not to answer that question.
Well, Sonia, Adam, these were horrifying images right at the start of the war. We saw Dominic's reporting last night where families are still praying at the graves of their young children who died, 120 thought to have lost their lives in this. You know, how important is it that America tells us what happened here?
It's really important that there's transparency, and this goes to sort of America's reputation in the world, I think, amongst its allies and its enemies, which is that if a mistake was made, as your correspondent said, there's mounting evidence. You know, people suspected from the very beginning that this was an American strike. The evidence that that was indeed the case, it has been mounting. So how and why did it happen? And if it was a mistake, will America put its hands up and admit to it? That's really important.
And Adam, we heard from Admiral Cooper that this was an active IRGC cruise missile site. And yet, as Dominic was explaining, speaking to the families, they've seen no military activity around this school.
Yeah, although there was, I think, general agreement that there had been some sort of base adjacent. But, I mean, really, this is about the character of Donald Trump and the administration. I mean, Donald Trump does not admit mistakes or admit he's got things wrong. I think others in, you know, the American power structure administration might be quite prepared to admit a mistake and move on. But in all the years we've had Donald Trump, I've yet to see him do that on any occasion.
Well, let's put that point, shall we, to our US correspondent, David Blevins, who joins us now. I mean, what is the excuse for the delay in reporting, David? You know, do the Americans also feel it's important to come to a conclusion on this? And is it part of the Trump psyche that we may not find out?
The only excuse they're offering, Anna, is that it is a complex investigation. But no matter how hard the Trump administration tries to brush this under the carpet, they can't. And that's because Menab is not just the name of a town. It is a symbol of two things: the most unthinkable human tragedy and the question of wartime accountability. We know the scale of that tragedy from Dom's reporting on the ground. Dozens of children killed on their first day back at school, on the first day of the war. I've just come from a press briefing at the White House where the Vice President J.D. Vance said he wanted his children to grow up in a world that is safe, and that's why Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, the parents in Menab sent their children to school hoping they would be safe, and they didn't come home. And yet no one has ever been held accountable. The Americans initially blamed the Iranians, who don't even have Tomahawk missiles, before then suggesting, because of the school's proximity to a military base, an Islamic Revolutionary Guard base, there had been targeting errors. But all we're getting right now is vague answers from the man at the helm of Central Command, whether that's inside the hearing or outside the hearing. But until someone says, we did this, here's how it happened, and we're sorry, then there is no truth, there is no prospect of justice, but there is the very real prospect of it happening again.
David Blevins, much appreciated, thank you. And certainly the war, it is paused, but it's not yet over. And in fact, Donald Trump today revealing just how close he came to restarting it today.
They knew I was getting ready to attack. I didn't tell them. I never tell anybody when.
You're in constant contact?
I never tell anybody when, but they knew that we were very close. I would say I was an hour away from making the decision to go today. And we would probably not be talking about a beautiful ballroom today. We'd be talking about that. And no, I had made the decision. So they called up, they had heard I made the decision. They said, sir, could you give us a couple of more days? Because we think they're being reasonable.
Yes, at the building site that is now the east wing of the White House. But, you know, once again, that is, you know, the Trump playbook, the maximalist pressure in order to get results. And the results right now are about the nuclear capability of Iran.
Yes, indeed. I mean, for all that he says that he was ready to attack, I think there'd be quite a lot of scepticism about that, given what it's achieved, and also that case of what happened in Menab, which I think the Americans first tried to blame on the Israelis before it was found that the type of weaponry used was only used by the Americans. But, you know, it looks to me as if the Americans want to claim victory, but they are just looking now for what they call an off-ramp to get out of this particular conflict, because it's not going very far, and the Iranians are simply recognising the weak position of the Americans and upping their demands for some sign of settlement and ceasefire.
Yeah, difficult, still difficult. The quandary that is there to try and release the oil from the Strait of Hormuz and indeed to try to tackle, you know, the hidden uranium that Iran is supposed to have and whether they still have future ambitions towards a nuclear arsenal.
Absolutely. It's still the same fundamental problems that existed 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And this is the issue with the Trump administration. I think they get us into these situations. They announce that they've got some kind of grand peace deal, you know, in the words of Donald Trump. And then actually it doesn't materialise. And the fundamental issues are still there, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Palestine, or now this situation with Iran.
I mean, Hegseth, actually, within the last 24 hours, the Secretary of State for War or Defence, whatever you call it, has actually said in terms, well, the Europeans need the oil out of the Strait of Hormuz more than we do. They should sort it out, having caused the situation in the first place, the Americans.
Yes, well, let's continue talking about oil, shall we? Because the government here in the UK is relaxing its sanctions on Russia to allow imports of diesel and jet fuel of Russian origin. The move comes into force tomorrow as the UK faces increasing fears of jet fuel shortages because of the Iran war. Well, as you can see, our political correspondent Alex Rogers has joined us. They're calling this a sanctions carve-out, Alex. So what is the detail and how quietly was this sunk under the radar?
So as you were saying, Anna, yes, they're relaxing sanctions on oil that originates in Russia but has maybe been sent to other countries to be refined. In October last year, the government did ban this to try and put pressure on Russia over its invasion in Ukraine. But it's relaxing it today, and it kind of snuck it out quite under the radar. And what will happen is tomorrow a licence will be issued that will allow this oil to be imported indefinitely, although Peter Kyle, the business secretary, will be able to review it periodically. And I think, as you say, it just really speaks to the financial pressures that the government's facing that are outside of its control. It's really undermining the initiative it's wanted to take on Russia. You know, it's been very tough sanctioning Russian individuals and products, but here the war in Iran just is taking that out of its hands, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? The point is that, you know, Russian oil, you know, heads to other countries where it's processed. For example, large volumes are shipped to countries such as India and Turkey, where they are refined and re-exported, complicating enforcement, as we know. Is this the right thing to do, do you think? The economy has trumped helping Ukraine, effectively.
I don't think it's a principled stand at all. I think it shows that the crunch that the government is under with, on the one hand, foreign policy sort of, principles that the government should be standing by, and on the other hand, they're staring down the face of rising energy prices, what that means for the cost of living. They've just taken a battering in the local elections. The Labour Party is in disarray. So to me, this is the Labour government saying, well, actually, we care more about these cost pressures on the British public. They may actually even make a principled case for it by saying, well, in the end, if we don't keep the public on side, they might turn against the other things that we're doing for Ukraine in the conflict with Russia. But it feels really wrong to me.
Well, tonight, actually, or this afternoon, the Prime Minister chaired a meeting of the Middle East Response Committee, and they've done a sort of a readout from that this evening, suggesting that we will continue to feel the effects, both the short and long term, of the Middle East conflict, and then saying it was highlighted that the government's economic plan has taken the long-term decisions needed to restore the country's finances and protect the UK from global shocks. And here we are, having something that's specifically responding to the global shock of oil, you know, on the same day that he's saying this.
Well, I think there are 2 points about this. One is that the government just simply doesn't want people's holidays to be cancelled. You know, the bad news of saying there's no jet fuel, so there's no holiday. That would almost certainly damage the popularity of any government that happened to be in charge. The other thing, of course, is my understanding of this is basically squabbling over a diminishing and finite pool of energy around because not enough is coming out of the Straits. So this is what's around the country, and this is Britain saying, well, we might try and buy some so that we can be all right, Jack. So it's a very, you know, it's a calculated situation, but it won't go on for very long. And I'm not even sure, to be honest, that it would directly benefit Russia because it will be the middlemen who are now refining this petroleum who would benefit.
But it does send a signal to Putin, doesn't it? Which is that, you know, we may have developed a nuclear red line, which is around sanctions, but we're prepared to relax them when it becomes difficult enough for us domestically.
Also comes as people think that maybe the Russians are on the retreat in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, we'll come to a story in the FT about exactly that a bit later on, shall we? Now, when it was first announced, the HS2 rail project was supposed to cost £32 billion. Today, the Transport Secretary said the cost was set to balloon to more than £100 billion and will be completed 14 years late, with trains running more slowly than originally planned. And she revealed cancelling the project would be more expensive than persisting with it. Here's our business and economics correspondent, Paul Kelso.
This particular size and shape, we call it the caterpillar box. Wow, that is an enormous hole. One conveyor belt, whole length. 5.5k long, 6k long. Yeah. 7k by the time it gets there. The government says HS2 is now going to cost more than £100 billion. Do you want to know how you spend that much money on a railway? Let's go and have a look and find out. Thank you. This is the Victoria Road crossover box. It's at the heart of a 13-kilometre tunnel under West London. That way is Birmingham. This way is Euston, and eventually HS2 trains will fly over points here in either direction. Now, they were supposed to be heading through these tunnels by Christmas this year. Now it won't be for another decade at the earliest, and they won't get to Euston until possibly the 2040s. Meanwhile, the budget has soared, and the only thing slowing down is the trains. Now, this is unquestionably monumental construction, but how has it come to be, in the eyes of so many, a monumental waste of money? HS2 was originally supposed to cost £33 billion. So far, £43 billion has been spent. The government now says it could cost more than £100 billion. That will make it the most expensive high-speed railway line on Earth, and it won't even go to its original destination. It was meant to run to both Manchester and Leeds, but those have both been cut back because of cost, leaving just a single line to Birmingham. It will first stop at Old Oak Common in this direction before eventually a tunnel will take it all the way to Euston in central London, possibly as late as 2043. These tunnels were built yard by yard with layer upon layer of concrete. The problem with HS2 is less the concrete than the fact, in the jargon, it was gold-plated, designed to the highest specification for the world's fastest trains. That meant not cutting corners, but eliminating them and going in straight lines. Well, that costs more money. The risks of the project weren't properly understood. Designs kept changing, and there was constant political pressure. And eventually, HS2 Limited, contractors and the government lost control.
I can confirm today that it could cost almost as much to cancel the line as it would to finish it, while delivering none of the benefits.
So what is this government going to do about it? Well, they won't be cancelling HS2. Putting things back as they were, well, that would cost as much as has been spent already. The trains will be slowed down to 320 kilometres an hour, the same as a Japanese bullet train. That saves a couple of £1 billion. Some back office roles are being cut, and the people who delivered the Elizabeth line are now in charge. There's no question, when this is eventually finished, it will be a world-class railway. But the journey to get here, well, that's been a national embarrassment, and fixing that matters. From energy to data centres, from airports to our water network, Britain needs infrastructure projects that work. If HS2's got a legacy, it might be a very, very expensive lesson in how and how not to do it.
But how do you build anything ever again? I mean, how do we build in this country major infrastructure projects? I mean, you know, it's left so many questions.
I mean, it's just extraordinary. You travel to other countries, whether it's Japan, whether it's countries on the continent, you get these high-speed railways and you get the sense that these railways were built on the right time scale, with the budget, or maybe a bit over, but not you know, there weren't the mishaps that there have been in the UK. It's just extraordinary when you look at it. This railway is going to end up costing more than double that it was forecast to, and half of it has been cancelled. It's only going to be London to Birmingham. It's not even going to run to central London until 2040, which is 14 years after it was supposed to be completed. You just look at a project like this and you're like, why can't we do these big infrastructure projects in the UK? What keeps going wrong?
It's funny, actually, because Dominic Cummings, he of Brexit fame and formerly of Boris Johnson's government, is having an absolute field day with this. He says that by January 2020, it was clear the project was a total disaster. Whitehall was chock-a-block with lies, suggesting that the entire country would be, the demand was so high that by mid-century, the entire country would be either on HS2 or building its successors. Some parts of Whitehall wanted to pull the plug. Boris didn't care about money. Money is just digits in a computer. We can make as many as we want, he said many times in 2020. I mean, you know, at what point was the decision, or should the decision, well, I mean, to be fair, it's been curtailed in its original plan by...
Well, I think people with hindsight now would say that it was misconceived in the sense that all the focus was on the sort of prestige of having the fastest railway in the world, which didn't really seem to matter when actually getting extra infrastructure was the important thing. But also, starting it in London was the most costly option, and it was the option which resulted in Manchester and Leeds, and of course the proposed Transpennine Railway all losing out. And that, I think, was a mistake. I think most people now would say it'd be better if we'd started in the north and gradually worked down. But anyone who's a Londoner, we've got this enormous, I mean, really big sort of square mile of building site in the heart of London at Euston Station and behind it, which is still leading to buses having to go into single lanes and wait at traffic lights and all that. And, you know, no plans as yet as to what they're going to do with it. I mean, quite extraordinary. You know, a failure really to have a coordinated idea about what to do with infrastructure. The one defence I would give it is that we are, relative to France and certainly relative to Japan, we have quite a heavily populated island, quite evenly distributed. And that means when you try and drive a motorway or indeed a road, you're always going to run up into objections, and people are going to be very upset about it. Although, you know, as we know, HS2 featured the famous Bat Tunnel, which is costing, I can't remember, is it 100 million or something?
I don't remember. I just know
say a lot of money.
Yeah, and the government is saying they want to change planning law so that never happens again. But there are going to be lots of people out there saying, well, you know, I care more about the bats and the countryside than I do about building a railway.
Yeah, but wildlife in Britain has been decimated, as we know, but that's another subject for another day. But that's been part of the issue. There's been ecological studies all the way up, haven't there?
And that's part of assessing the project to start with and figuring out what you're going to do and how much it's actually going to cost. But apparently with these, they gave out these contracts before the design was properly conceived, which is why the costs were so badly underestimated.
OK. Lots more still to come, including we will have a first look at what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers.
urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Well, it's time now to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Let's start with the Financial Times, which reports on a feud brewing between the Treasury and furious supermarket bosses after Rachel Reeves suggested caps on basic food items to combat the cost of living crisis. The Metro reports on claims by participants in the Channel 4 reality show Married at First Sight UK that they were raped and sexually assaulted during filming. In The Guardian, the government's climate advisors say the UK will need to get used to being a hot country. Their recommendations include planting more trees and installing air conditioning units in all care homes within the next 10 years. The Tory leader Kemi Badenoch criticises Sir Keir Starmer, stating rising energy costs are another failed Labour promise. The Eye looks at what Andy Burnham might do if he managed to claim the top job and speculates about who would join his cabinet, suggesting cabinet ministers are wooing him. The Daily Mirror leads with Kylie's cancer battle. The star had the disease for a second time, the paper says. And the Star asks us what came first, the chicken or the 3D egg, after birds hatched from man-made eggs. Paper's a bit late, one might speculate because of the football tonight. But anyway, we'll get more of them in as we speak. But let's go to the Eye, first of all. Sonia, why don't you kick off with that? Cabinet ministers are already starting to woo Burnham in a race for the top jobs.
Sure. So with all the chaos that's been going on in the Labour Party, there's been a lot of focus on who wants the top job, who wants to be Prime Minister. But there's a whole other layer of sort of political machinations, which is that cabinet ministers who don't think they'll be going for the top job are trying to read the tea leaves, see who's got the biggest chance of being Prime Minister and thinking, well, what do I need to do to get in with that person? What does it mean if I back one of their rivals in the race and their rival ends up losing? Does it mean that I get sacked from the cabinet? And that's what this story's essentially about. And I think it's fair to say that Andy Burnham, now that there is going to be a by-election in Makerfield and it's been confirmed that he's going for that selection, Labour will be announcing their candidate this week. It would be the shocking story, I think, of the decade if it weren't Andy Burnham who was selected. He's already got it. I didn't realise it was announced.
It's been announced today.
Oh gosh, well, thank you.
Had a busy day. Yeah.
I have had a busy day. Well, thank you for catching me up on that.
But just hold your thought on that, because we're going to start looking at the list of candidates.
OK, of course.
Who are currently confirmed so far as standing in that Makerfield by-election. So Andy Burnham for Labour, now confirmed. Robert Kenyon for Reform. Alan Howlin, Lord Hope for the official monster raving Looney Party. And Rebecca Shepherd for Restore Britain. Clearly, those are the ones who have confirmed their standing in that by-election so far. We are expecting more to come, for example, from the Conservatives and the Lib Dems and the Greens and more.
Although technically, we don't yet have a by-election. There is a vacancy.
Yeah.
Because Josh Simons has received the Chiltern Hundreds. But...
Which means what, Adam?
Basically, it's the way you disqualify an MP. If the Treasury makes them the steward of the Chiltern Hundreds, that is a Crown office, and you can't hold a Crown office and be an MP.
Goodness me.
So that's how you get people out. But he's done that. But what hasn't happened is the writ has not been moved. Until the writ is moved, which normally would be by the whips of the party that held the seat, i.e. the Labour whips, there's no by-election. And the writ we're expecting this week, if it's going to be on the 18th of June that the contest takes place. And even after the writ is moved, there is then a further period until what's called nominations close, and that's when you have the full list of who's running. At the moment, all this is speculative.
Yeah, well, with an abundance of caution, we have gone a little early, is what Adam's trying to tell us.
Absolutely.
Better that way round than the other. But there we go. Anyway, shall we continue? Let's go to The Guardian, which is... I think I interrupted you anyways. Apologies. Adam, let's go to The Guardian. Angela Rayner entering number 10 for a summit on the Renters' Rights Act. So she's, you know, all is not lost in the relationship between Starmer and Angela Rayner, it seems.
Yes, and there's also suggestions that she was offered to occupy Wes Streeting's shoes at the Department of Health and decided that she didn't want to do that at this stage, even although she's claiming that she was exonerated over her tax affairs on her house. But, I mean, look, all this simply shows is that, you know, the future of the Labour Party is in play and... Angela Rayner will be one of the senior players in that. I still think if, and it's a massive if, Andy Burnham wins the by-election, personally, I think the pressure on Keir Starmer to announce a departure date will be unbearable. I also think that it's a possibility that the message from MPs will be that they don't want to mess around and have a leadership contest, that they simply want to get Andy Burnham in the job before the summer break.
Because of the democratic question of Labour members, you know, the few 100,000 Labour members once again determining our Prime Minister, as Tory members did with Liz Truss, and whether actually that is democratic enough for the nation at this critical time of having so many Prime Ministers in the last decade. And it's a fundamental question about the role of Prime Minister.
Absolutely, it's well, I think it's fundamentally undemocratic. I think if your party is in government and you're switching leader, to put that question, who should be the next Prime Minister, to 300,000 or so Labour members who are not representative of the country, they sit far to the left of the median voter, that is fundamentally undemocratic. It makes the Labour Party, I think, look very navel-gazing if you've got leadership contenders for weeks over the summer having a conversation not with the public at large, but with 300,000 Labour members. And because they sit to the left of the electorate, I think the risk is, if it were to go to a full-blown leadership contest, it pulls every single leadership candidate to the left because they are pitching to members, they are not pitching to voters.
Yeah, but this time there is a difference with all the other transfers we saw in the Conservative years, which is Andy Burnham will have got there by passing a verdict of the electorate, albeit a microcosm of the verdict in Makerfield. But nonetheless, everyone keeps on saying...
Does that count?
Well, I think, you know, given that this is seen as a kind of generational clash between Andy Burnham for Labour and Reform UK, and this is seen as a place which both parties really have claimed as a heartland, I think whoever wins it, it will be bigger than Makerfield. And if Andy Burnham wins it, he can say, look, I've gone out in the mood of the country, this dangerous mood, and I've still won. And that will be better, frankly, than manoeuvring within the Labour Party as far as vindication as to are you ready for the job?
Adam, I am assured the writ has been moved for the by-election.
For the 18th?
For the 18th? Yes, I think so. Yeah?
Well, there I was behind, you were behind on who?
We were both behind on different things today. Well, things are moving so quickly.
Let's go to The Times then, which is about Starmer, and it suggests Sir Keir Starmer could remain in Downing Street until early next year, his allies have said, as the Prime Minister continues to resist demands to set out a timetable. Stand firm, Starmer, it's up the top there, may still be in Downing Street in the new year.
Well, I think this is quite desperate briefing from Starmer allies in number 10. So what they're saying is that even if Andy Burnham were to win this by-election in Makerfield, which would mean that he would find himself in Parliament by late June, they think that doesn't necessarily... The assumption has always been that that would mean that Starmer would have to stand aside because there is somebody who's very clearly itching for the top job, who's just won this by-election of massive strategic importance. Now, Starmer's allies are saying, well, maybe actually Starmer wouldn't have to do that. Maybe we'd have to wait and see what happened in the Greater Manchester, the election, the by-election for Greater Manchester Mayor. And maybe if Labour were to lose that, then actually that would undermine Andy Burnham and he couldn't go for the leadership. I do do think this is quite desperate, because I think in the same way as we saw a very emotional reaction of Labour MPs to the election results a few days ago, if Andy Burnham wins in Makerfield, there will be a hugely emotional reaction, a positive emotional reaction in the other side. So I think that will be a train that's very hard to stop.
And one more update on our slow motion decision on this. Either the 18th or the 25th is up to the council to decide. Should we park that for now? I think we just get.
Are you sure the writ's been moved then? Because I thought the writ normally named a date.
I don't know, I'm just really enjoying this.
Yeah.
I'm the go-between, I'm being told in my ear. Yes, we're told it has been.
Yeah, but I would just say one thing, that Keir Starmer has demonstrated that he is the master of process.
True.
And clearly he's looking at the process here and thinking, well, maybe even if Andy Burnham wins, I can stay on by saying we've got to wait for the by-election. I don't think that will wash. No. What I do think, however, is if Andy Burnham loses, there's quite a good chance that Keir Starmer will survive.
I agree with that, actually, Adam. Yeah.
Let's move on, because it's writ or not to writ and all that. Anyway, The Times, milk, egg and bread prices could be frozen. This is interesting, is it not? Supermarkets may be asked to freeze the prices of essential goods such as eggs, bread and milk to try to ease the impact of the Iran war. I'm sure Andy Burnham started talking about some form of price controls yesterday in his speech. But anyway, the Treasury is in discussion with supermarkets about incentivising them to act in exchange for the lifting of regulations, for example, on packaging and on healthy food, both of which you might say are critical to our future. But this is once again how the government, in a market capitalist society, tries to intervene to allow us to survive when things are so expensive.
Yeah. Well, it's a very different approach to the SNP. So the SNP announced today they want compulsory price controls on the price of some goods like bread and eggs in Scottish supermarkets. What the Westminster government is doing, what the Treasury, the approach of Treasury is apparently trying out, is talking to supermarkets and saying, if you voluntarily do these price caps on things like bread, eggs, milk, in exchange, if you were to agree to that, we would loosen up some of the regulations coming down the line on supermarket packaging that were going to be a source of revenue for the Treasury, but were going to cost the supermarkets. So in some ways, it's an interesting approach. I think the question mark that it raises, though, is it's milk, egg and bread. For example, milk prices are actually really competitive in the sense that they are the things that, we have some of the cheapest food prices in Europe, actually in British supermarkets.
Complain they don't get paid properly for many of these products already.
Yes, exactly. And the prices are low. And for milk, for example, your 4 pints of milk, it's a standard price across a lot of supermarkets because it's a loss leader for them. Yeah. So how much will this actually achieve in a very lean market where on the basics, often, the margins are very low? It's on other types of goods in supermarkets that supermarkets make their profit.
And the Financial Times, while you're talking, the Financial Times is also running this, suggesting supermarkets have reacted furiously to the proposals under which grocers would agree to cap the prices of these essential goods such as eggs, bread and milk, for the very reasons that the profit margins are just disastrous already for them in some of these products. Adam, your thoughts on this?
I have to say, I think this is desperate stuff, to be honest. That if you're throwing out your health targets on healthy foods, or you're throwing out your environmental targets on packaging as a bribe to supermarkets to say we can fix the price, just doesn't add up. And all the evidence of people who've tried it, including in this country, is that price controls don't work and they make things worse in the end. And as Sonia says, we've now got price controls effectively. I mean, how many times have you gone in the supermarket and it says we're matching Aldi or we're matching Tesco or whatever? And it's the competition which keeps the prices down, not the government fanning around, frankly.
Yes, and we know that transport costs will go up. We know that fertiliser costs will go up. The food price inflation is currently about 3.7%. Suggestion here is that it could rise as high as 10% as a result of the Iran war. Big supermarkets, the FT says, typically stock between 30,000 and 60,000 products, and basics such as milk, bread, eggs, potatoes, butter and Bananas, who knew, are the most frequently bought items. Supermarkets have long complained about operating on tight profits, but Tesco, the biggest supermarket, recently reported an 8.5% rise in annual pre-tax profits, which is actually quite healthy for them.
And what this comes down to is the economic question, right, which is that if the government gives supermarkets a concession that's going to save them money, a regulatory concession, what is the best way of ensuring that the supermarkets pass those savings onto consumers? I think there are economists who would be sceptical about the fact that it's through voluntary price controls, but I think it is an open question. Well, how do you do it? How do you make sure that it ends up in cheaper prices as opposed to higher profits for shareholders?
And also the costs that's been imposed on supermarkets, on the retail trade as a whole, are this government's increases in the minimum wage and also
national insurance,
employers' national insurance,
business rates.
Yeah. The complaints will be many, I'm sure. Let's go back to the Financial Times, shall we? China's Xi Jinping told Donald Trump that Putin might regret launching the war against Ukraine. I think the Chinese have denied that. But this, if true, is really interesting, isn't it? Given Putin is now also making a visit just days after Trump went to Beijing.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming out from American officials who are on the visit. And Xi has denied it. But given the way in which the Chinese leadership measure their words, this will be quite significant. I mean, there were reports, mainly coming out of Ukraine yesterday, that they had heard hints that Xi was actually going to say the same thing to Putin and say that, you know, you're not getting anywhere with this one. Perhaps you ought to wind it in.
Very interesting.
And there have been reports today that the Ukrainians have cut the landline between Russia and Crimea, which would be a very significant move.
Yeah, very interesting. And also they know they don't have the ear of Donald Trump, who's distracted at the moment with another conflict, the one in Iran. The Guardian, Sonia, the UK must get used to being a hot country. What sort of measures do they suggest we now need to think about?
So I think the key one is thinking about future-proofing the housing that we're built. And actually, I know this because I live in a new-build flat that was built, you know, well, it's not actually that new build. It was built 25 years ago, but it was definitely not built for the temperatures of 2026. It gets really, really hot during the summer, which I understand is a problem with a lot of buildings that were built around kind of the year 2000, because climate change was not baked in to the design of these buildings. And you've got a new report from the Climate Change Committee today saying we really have to be thinking about this because as well as trying to avert temperature increases in the first place, we've got to be thinking about how to mitigate them. So the kinds of things that they're talking about are, you know, air conditioning being built as standard in all homes, which if you'd said that to somebody from the 1970s or the 1980s in the UK, they wouldn't have been able to believe you. But apparently by 2050, every area in the UK can be expected to be hit by heat waves where temperatures reach 40 degrees centigrade. I mean, it's just astonishing.
This comes before an expected heat wave this weekend when temperatures in the UK are supposed to be above Greece, Spain, Italy, anywhere else.
Yeah. Some parts of the UK, as usual. And I'm just looking at the Daily Telegraph, actually, Labour plotting a death tax on more expensive homes. We'll talk about that next hour, certainly, because we've got this to tell you about. Swatch riots, yes, Swatch riots, tear gas and fights over a limited edition timepiece. We'll look at the pictures on that after this.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait, right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing.
I suppose it is what we do.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation. We lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighbourhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Well, let's take you to North London now because if you've, well, you won't have missed it, Arsenal tonight becoming the Premier League champions without kicking a ball for the first time in 22 years. Manchester City, they drew against Bournemouth, meaning the Gunners cannot now be caught, and their wait since... oh, it's busy. Let's take you to Rob Harris. I don't know, Rob, you probably can't hear me. I don't know if I can even be seen by you because, Rob, be safe anyway. What's the mood?
Well, I don't know if you can hear me here at the moment, but quite a scene of celebrations here on the Holloway Road near Arsenal's ground. Thousands of fans come out into the night after ending their 22-year wait to win the Premier League. These are the moments that they've waited for. Absolutely ecstatic as you can see. So busy. Move away from near the Emirates just to be able to speak to you. And the title secured ultimately by Manchester City, dropping points, only managing to draw at Bournemouth tonight. So with a game to spare, Mikel Arteta's side know they will be receiving a Premier League trophy on Sunday. This is the outpouring of emotion after so many years of hurt, so many near misses, waiting since 2004 and the days of Arsene Wenger to finally be crowned champions again of the Premier League. And this season for Arsenal can still get better yet because they're in the Champions League final against Paris Saint-Germain in a week and a half's time. But they're delighted. What does it mean to you, the title? What does it mean to you, the title?
Yeah, it means a lot. We're waiting for 22 years now, so it's very special for me. So, yeah.
Enjoy the celebrations. Well, so many thousands of fans still arriving here. The Emirates that way, the party going on into the night.
Rob, I'm just exhausted watching you, I have to be honest with you. But congratulations, obviously, to those fans. Congratulations to Arsenal. You know, what a shame Arsene Wenger never got there, I suppose, because he tried for so many years, didn't he? But
no, he did.
Wait,
He won it.
They won it then.
But 22 years ago.
20, exactly, yeah. So, but the point is they can still do the double. I'm still watching the pictures, actually, of people celebrating on the streets as our camera fades off. But, you know, congratulations to Arsenal in the end. Manchester City needed 2 wins, did not get it. That draw with Bournemouth, meaning clearly that Arsenal have gone through and winning the Premier League for the first time in 22 years. So, lots more still to come in the next part of our programme. We promised you the Swatch story. We will do that in the 11. And also bring you the latest on what we've been following with our correspondent Dominic Waghorn, who is in Minab in southern Iran, covering the story that happened on the first day of the war in which 120 Iranian children died. We have put that to the Americans. We'll bring you that after this break.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Tonight on The Wrap. Sky News challenges the US military over claims that an American missile killed more than 120 children at a school in the Iranian city of Minab on the opening day of the war.
Admiral Mark Stone from Sky News. Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Investigation's on.
For how long can you hide behind an investigation is ongoing, sir? We have a team in Minab right now. They have seen what happened. They have seen no evidence of a Iranian missile base there. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is happening, sir?
The government tonight waters down sanctions on Russian oil to allow diesel and jet fuel of Russian origin to be imported into the UK. Joy for the players and supporters of Arsenal as they are crowned Premier League champions after a 22-year wait. Well, we discuss the day's biggest stories with the journalist and broadcaster, Sonia Soda, and the political commentator, Adam Bolton. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including the government asking supermarkets to cap prices on staple foods. Hello, a very good evening to you, and Sonia and Adam, welcome to you both as well. Now, Sky News has tonight challenged the US military over claims that a missile which killed scores of Iranian children on the opening day of the Iran war was fired by America. Last night, we brought you eyewitness reporting from the scene of the strike on a school after Sky's Dominic Wackhorn became the first international journalist to reach the city of Minab since the conflict began.
This is actually quite overwhelming. Child after child, grave after grave, and almost 3 months on, the families still coming every evening to spend hours by their children's graveside. And talking to some of them, of course, is deeply moving.
Dominic Wackhorn there. Well, despite an initial assessment by US officials that the United States had carried out the attack, the US government is still to admit responsibility. Today, the top US military leader in the Middle East was pressed in Congress on why it was taking so long.
The United States does not deliberately target us.
Got that part.
Period. Full stop. And nor are the Iranian people our enemy. The IRGC is the adversary in this case.
I heard that in your opening statement, Admiral. I asked you a very specific question, and I'm curious what the answer is.
So the investigation is ongoing. As soon as it is complete, I'm happy to be as transparent as possible.
We will not take responsibility for something we very obviously did.
So it's a complex investigation. The school itself is located on an active IRGC cruise missile base.
Absolutely.
It's more complex than the average strike. As soon as we're complete, I'm fully committed to transparency, given your important oversight role and the other members here.
Just so you know, and I have an enormous amount of respect for you and an enormous amount of respect for the Pentagon, I do not trust that answer. What we've seen out of the Secretary of Defense and his callous disregard for any sort of rules of engagement or protecting civilian life make us suspicious. And that's the only second question I have for you. Do you think it's ever appropriate for anybody in a leadership position to use the words "no quarter" when describing how we are conducting our operations in Iran?
So I think it's appropriate as military leaders. We follow the law of armed conflict and our constitutional responsibilities, and that's what we've done.
And you would agree that no quarter is not following the law?
I would agree it's our constitutional responsibility to follow the law.
Well, as he left that evidence session, Admiral Cooper was challenged by our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
Admiral Mark Stone from Sky News. Can you explain why you cannot reveal what happened in Minab?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Investigation's on.
For how long can you hide behind an investigation is ongoing, sir? We have a team in Minab right now. They have seen what happened. They have seen no evidence of a Iranian missile base there. For how long can you hide behind an investigation is happening, sir? When will the investigation conclude? Admiral, can you tell us when the investigation will conclude? Can you say anything to the families who died in Minab, sir?
Mark Stone there. Well, as I said, our international affairs editor, Dominic Wackhorn, is in Minab, where that strike took place. Well, this was his reaction to the comments by Admiral Cooper.
We have to listen very closely to what the Admiral said there, because he was answering this question pretty disingenuously. Pretty painful listening to Admiral here sort of wriggling under congressional cross-examination and not answering the question. The question was, was America behind the attack on this school that killed at least 150 people, 120 of them children, and he said America does not target civilians. That is not the question he was asked to answer, as he was reminded, and he simply wouldn't answer that question, which will, I think, add to the frustration of people here who say that for almost 3 months now, they've wanted answers, and America will simply not do what it's done in the past, in Iraq and Afghanistan, where when all the evidence is stacking up against it, these were American-made Tomahawk missiles. That morning, the Americans were targeting a number of targets in the area. With all that evidence against them, why not just say what they've done in the past, which is, yes, we were behind it. It was a mistake. We're now trying to work out why. We've been to the school a number of times this week, and I can categorically tell you it is a school, or was a school. It's now a pile of rubble. It is not a missile base. It's not on a missile base. It's been a school for at least 10 years. It's marked on maps, has been marked on maps for at least 10 years as a primary school. If you look at it from satellites, you'll see playgrounds, you'll see the markings of football pitches as well. A lot of the kids there, we've spoken to their parents, were soccer mad. So you could see it was a primary school. And we've spoken to, as I say, parents, teachers, nurses, children as well, and we've asked most of them, because there were and have been these reports that it was near or part of a military base. You know, has it been, or is it anywhere near a military base? Have you seen any evidence of military activity? And they've all said no. Now, there are some maps that show it is adjacent to or close to buildings that there are some reports linking to the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and some of those buildings may have connections or may have had connections with the IRGC. But I can categorically tell you that nowhere near the school that we've been to and filmed for almost a week is there any evidence of military activity. It's certainly not on an active IRGC military base, unless that's a bunker deep underground, which I think we would know by now, because there's a big crater in the middle of this school caused by cruise missiles. So it looks like this school was tragically misidentified. I think we have to assume that it wasn't deliberately targeted as a school. That is not what the US military has ever done. But if it was misidentified, that is equally potentially a breach of the rules of war. So these are very grave allegations against America, and it is not a complex question to answer. Did you hit this school deliberately, or did you do it by mistake? And what is completely baffling is why it's taken America almost 3 months still not to answer that question.
Dominic Waghorn reporting there from inside Iran. Will we get a quick answer, do you think, Adam?
No, I don't think we will, because I think this is the attitude of the Trump administration, the attitude not just of Donald Trump, but also of Pete Hegseth. We heard there talking about war without quarter. I don't think they are inclined to apologise or explain. They simply move on to the next thing. And I think, to me, just looking at that footage, it was quite clear that the Admiral was uncomfortable. And, you know, we have to remember that in the Pentagon in particular, Hegseth has now sacked, I think, about a dozen senior military officers from their posts for not towing the line with him or embarrassing him as he sees it. So they're all walking on eggshells as well, and they're not going to do it.
And certainly we heard, did we not, from J.D. Vance, who's standing in for Caroline Leavitt, the White House press spokeswoman who's on maternity leave, suggesting there are two pathways we can go down in terms of the broader war. The president has told us, he says, to aggressively negotiate with the Iranians. There's an option B, and the option B is that we could restart the military campaign to continue to prosecute the case, to continue to try to achieve America's objectives. And in fact, Donald Trump's been speaking about exactly that. Let's have a listen to how close he came to pressing the go button today.
They knew I was getting ready to attack. I didn't tell them. I never tell anybody when.
You're in constant contact?
I never tell anybody when, but they knew that we were very close. I would say I was an hour away from making the decision to go today. And we would probably not be talking about a beautiful ballroom today. We'd be talking about that. And no, I had made the decision. So they called up. They had heard I made the decision. They said, "Sir, could you give us a couple of more days because we think they're being reasonable."
Yeah, I mean, you know, the aggressive negotiations that they want underway, as asked by Gulf allies as well, you know, will it get anywhere, do you think?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that as a negotiating strategy, which is you negotiate hard and you have this threat lurking saying, you know, we can strike again and we can strike very dangerously for Iran. I think the problem with that is the question of whether that is a credible threat or not, because it's never really looked like the US was committed to a longer-term intervention in Iran. The way it looks with hindsight is that the US intervened and that Trump, quite naively probably, believed that, you know, there might be sort of a few days of intervention, the regime would topple and then America could get out. It was never really going to play out like that. But America doesn't seem to have the stomach for continuing to be, you know, for continuing military intervention in Iran. It's got itself into this position now with the Strait of Hormuz, where oil is blocked up. Lots of America's allies which are dependent on that oil source, are very, very cross about it, and something needs to happen about it. So, you know, I think Iran will probably look at this threat and say, well, you know, America's not going to follow through. The Iranian regime, it's not a democracy. They have a much higher pain threshold in terms of tolerating, as a regime, American strikes and say the reverse. So I think the problem is it's not a credible threat.
Yeah, and I see tonight the Senate has advanced legislation that seeks to force President Donald Trump to withdraw from the Iran war. The Democrats have repeatedly tried to have a vote, but more Republicans are crossing the floor, effectively, including one tonight who has done so, which has allowed it through. So we'll see where that goes. In the meantime, the government is relaxing its sanctions on Russia to allow imports of diesel and jet fuel of Russian origin. The move comes into force tomorrow as the UK faces increasing fears of jet fuel shortages because of the Iran war. Now, this is oil that Yes, we were waiting to speak to our correspondent. This is oil that is shipped from Russia. It goes to second countries like Turkey and India, for example, and then is exported again. So it already gets harder to track, doesn't it, in terms of sanctions?
Exactly. It's on the international market, and I don't know how much oil, crude oil, is coming out of Russia to these sources. I think one gets the impression that altogether, the supply of oil has slowed down. So this is, I mean, we've been using the word desperate, but this is another desperate gesture by the government going against its policy of sanctions on Russia in order to kind of save the holiday season, really. So that there will be planes and people won't have their holidays cancelled at a time which is, you know, extremely sensitive. And it's similar in the sense to the efforts to keep the prices down in the supermarket is just running scared of an angry reaction from the public.
Yes, well, Alex Rogers, our political correspondent, joins us now. I mean, this was slipped out pretty quietly, wasn't it? They're calling it a sanctions carve-up. You know, in full acknowledgement, actually, that the economy trumps, at this point, helping Ukraine by damaging Russia's oil sales.
That's totally right, Anna. It slipped out very surreptitiously, very under the radar. And what will happen is that tomorrow this licence will come into force, saying that this oil that was previously banned, we can import it indefinitely. And the business secretary can review that. But I think that is a real changing tap, because we banned this oil in October, and Rachel Reeves was really adamant that this is the right thing to do. But as Adam was saying, the government's clearly having to put aside its principles on Ukraine, really, because it's worried about the lack of a potential shortage in jet fuel and cancelled summer holidays, which is the kind of storm it can't really weather now after the battering it's had in the local elections and how unpopular it is at the moment.
Alex, thanks very much indeed. And in fact, a lot of the focus of the newspapers, which we'll come to at hour, is about the cost of living and whether the government can persuade supermarkets to reduce the price of staples. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. In the meantime, North London, let's go there. Arsenal, tonight becoming the Premier League champions without kicking a ball. Manchester City drew against Bournemouth, meaning the Gunners could not be caught, and their 22-year wait for the league title finally comes to an end. So let's show you some of the scenes.
Champions of England!
As as the final whistle went at Bournemouth, where Manchester City's title dream finally hit the rocks for Arsenal after so many seasons, as the nearly men finally being able to celebrate a first Premier League title too for manager Mikel Arteta. As for the players, well, these were the celebrations, if it moves, which showed just what it meant for them. For season after season, they've seen the trophy slip through their fingers, and at last tonight, they finally got to finish above Manchester City, and they're ready to party long and hard, one presumes. Who knows? I think that's speculation, isn't it? The Prime Minister, of course, a lifelong Arsenal fan, remember, has posted this: 22 long years for the Arsenal, but finally we're back where we belong. Champions! Exclamation mark. So let's go to our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who is in North London. And it's noisy there, Rob.
It's very noisy. So many thousands of Arsenal fans immediately spilled out into the street. They're waiting for the result from Bournemouth. Would City win to keep the title race alive going to the final day? No, they couldn't. So Arsenal, champions for the first time in 22 years. And it's why fans are still absolutely wanting to be. This is what it means to them. This is what the weight means to them. The fact they've had to endure so many years of anger, waiting to be crowned champions again, and we'll go and talk to some of them in a second. Somehow, through all this, they just want to sing their champions. What does it feel like for you after all the years Arsenal missing out to be Premier League champions?
Last time Arsenal won, I wasn't even fertilised. I'm 21 years of age. Listen, the greatest day of my life at the sports clubs is nappies. Nappies! 22 years we've been waiting for this. Look at the streets of London. No club can do it like this. No
They're enjoying this. They've waited so long, and you won't have the final day agony. No need to take it. Which players for you have delivered this glory? Who are you most proud of?
Listen. All of the boys done us well, but there's only one man that I got. I just want to give a shout out to Super Mick Arteta. He knew what he wanted to do from the beginning. And one player. Listen, boys. There was conquerors, and there's Mick Arteta. Who knows what he wanted to do?
Well, they're loving the manager who played for them and has now delivered them the silverware. And this season can get even better. There's a Champions League final to come in a week and a half against Paris Saint-Germain. They've never won the European Cup. This could be on the cards.
I hate to think the reaction if they do the double, Adam. Goodness me. That's
well, I feel really old now. That fan who was saying that he wasn't fertilised 22 years ago. Way to go in making us feel ancient.
I think can't remember where the final is, Austria or somewhere, I think.
Oh, I can't remember, actually. Yeah.
But Arsenal are going to get the trophy at Crystal Palace on Saturday. That's their last match of the season. Crystal Palace, of course... what did they do? They did something good last year, I know, because my colleague John Pinar's at Palace, I think they got promoted or something.
Well, I'm actually originally from Croydon, so they would be my team if I had a team.
Yeah, but
I don't know what they did last year.
But even in the unlikely event that Palace beat Arsenal, Arsenal will still be presented with the trophy then.
Yeah, well, Pep Guardiola has congratulated Arsenal on behalf of Man City. I want to congratulate Mikel Arteta, of course, and Arsenal. That's what he's had to say. Of course, big questions about his future. We fought. First half was really good. We missed a bit. Second half was really good, and we had a good chance. But, of course, they drew against Bournemouth. Yeah. So the rest, as they say, is history. But, you know...
I didn't see Keir Starmer or Piers Morgan out there on the whole.
No, but it's nice, though, isn't it, that Keir Starmer's got something to be pleased about, because it has been a tough few weeks for him, shall we say.
Well, he might have more time to watch his favourite team coming out.
True, this is true.
Be nice, Adam. You know, celebrating for now. Anyway, congratulations to Arsenal. See what happens with their next go at winning a trophy as well. Coming up, we will have more on a police appeal to possible victims of the Channel 4 programme Married at First Sight UK.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
The Metropolitan Police have urged all potential victims of sexual assault on the Channel 4 reality programme, Married at First Sight UK, to get in touch with them. It follows allegations of rape and sexual misconduct from 3 women who appeared on the show. Well, Sarah Jane Mee earlier spoke to Charlotte Proudman, a barrister representing one of the women who we're calling Lizzie to protect her identity. She asked Charlotte what Lizzie said happened to her on the show.
We know that Lizzie indeed was raped whilst on Married at First Sight, something that she did tell CPL Productions before all of the series had been aired. They dispute that, but Lizzie describes suffering egregious sexual violence. Now, notwithstanding what either party say, clearly there were signs of significant levels of harm that she was potentially sustaining, and they should have taken a zero-tolerance approach and ended that relationship and protected her and prioritised the safety of their contestants over and above entertainment. One does wonder whether certain individuals who are more vulnerable, may have been victims in past relationships, are paired up with those who might engage in predatory behaviour or indeed have a history of criminality or such behaviours.
Charlotte, from what you've heard from Lizzie and from what you've seen from the testimony of these other women, do you feel that this is just the tip of the iceberg? Are you expecting more former participants of this show or other shows to come forward as a result?
Yes, I am. I mean, I'm certainly aware of other contestants on what I might describe as reality TV dating shows, having experienced hideous forms of abuse behind closed doors, and effectively that being allowed to continue without action being taken to protect them. So I suspect that we will see very many more women come forward. And I'm obviously deeply concerned about the fact that Channel 4 continued to air Married at First Sight until yesterday, after the BBC Panorama documentary. So every time viewers were watching Lizzie, my client's relationship, unfold on screen, Lizzie knew that behind all of that was her eventually being raped. That, in my view, is deeply, deeply and profoundly concerning.
Well, last night, Channel 4's chief executive, Priya Dogra, gave this statement on the allegations. It would be wholly inappropriate for me to comment on what are very serious allegations made against some MAFS UK contributors. Those allegations, which I understand are disputed by the contributors accused, are not something that Channel 4 is in a position to adjudicate on. On the claims that Channel 4 may have failed in its duty of care, I believe that when concerns about contributor welfare were raised, and based on the information available at the time, Channel 4 acted quickly, appropriately, sensitively, and with well-being front and centre. So we hear there that the accused contributors do dispute these allegations, Sonia, but clearly now the police would like people to come forward because, as we heard in last night's Panorama on the BBC, those who have made the accusations had at that point not gone to the police about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the police have said that they're very keen for women to come forward with these allegations so they can conduct any necessary criminal investigations, see if there's the evidence that they would require in order to meet a charge for the Crown Prosecution Service, to meet a charging threshold. So there's that question. Another legal question is about the legal obligations that the production company in particular would have had around these women, their duty of care to safeguard their welfare. So there are a whole set of legal questions around that as well. But for Channel 4, there are huge questions, which is, there are questions for the production company, there's questions for Channel 4 about exactly when, for example, they became aware of these allegations and whether the actions that they took were appropriate and proportionate. But I think a lot of people will be asking questions as well, where when you look at a show like this, Married at First Sight, a reality TV show where you're putting sometimes quite vulnerable people in a bubble, but even more than a show like, say, Big Brother or Love Island, you are thrusting two people together to be in a relationship, a manufactured relationship, and become reality TV stars at the same time. Some people would say structurally, it's not possible to do that safely with safeguarding because so much could go wrong in the power dynamics in that relationship.
And Adam, I mean, it's not the first show to have questions raised about it. Do you think there is a danger that as television companies try to push the format to attract viewers, that actually formats can be pushed a little bit too far?
Yes, I do. And there are versions of this programme, I think, around the world, and there'll be different standards applied. I mean, I've never watched this programme, but it always struck me as a tacky concept in the first place, the idea of getting potentially vulnerable people, but people who are prepared to marry at first sight and then putting them together afterwards, sounds like a recipe for something going wrong, and clearly it has gone wrong, although...
the allegation is it's...
I mean, whether or not the allegations are borne out, it's clearly gone wrong, and we've got these series suspended. But, I mean, it's also kind of quite interesting in as much as this is a BBC documentary that's part of this off, so it's kind of dog-eat-dog between the various networks.
It is often the way, actually.
Yes.
And one thing I will say, it's kind of interesting. So if you look at a series like Love Island, for example, it had a terrible run in the first couple of series with, a contestant who took her own life. We saw the same sort of issues with Caroline Flack. But in later series, I mean, the early series, when I watched them, they were full of, alcohol and stuff and bad behaviour. The later series, very strict protocols put in place, for example, around how much contestants were allowed to drink, welfare checks on the way in. You compare that, I was horrified. I've not seen Married at First Sight, I have to say, but watching a show like Love is Blind on Netflix, for example, I watched the first series of that and I was kind of horrified at how exploitative it felt because contestants were given lots of alcohol and it felt like they were encouraged. Yeah. So I think there are different standards across different platforms as well. Yes. And I certainly think some of the streamers may be worse than some of our terrestrial channels.
And there are also, legal issues about what constitutes rape and when you're encouraging intimacy between people, that can overlap legally into rape quite easily, I think. Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Definitely issues around consent, yeah.
Yeah, OK, apologies. Time's pressing on. It's past. Let's take a look at the front pages, then, of tomorrow's newspapers, starting with the Metro. Reports on those claims by participants in the Channel 4 reality show Married at First Sight UK that they were raped and sexually assaulted during filming. And the Sun claims that the latest show has been the new series canned over the scandal they suggest. The Financial Times reports on a feud brewing, it says, between the Treasury and what they call furious supermarket bosses after Rachel Reeves suggested caps on basic food items to combat the cost of living crisis. The Telegraph is also leading with that story, saying the Chancellor is putting pressure on supermarkets to agree to her plan. The Times reports that the price of bread, milk and eggs could be frozen if Reeves's supermarket plans come off. In The Guardian, the government's climate advisors say the UK will need to get used to being a hot country. Their recommendations include planting more trees and installing air conditioning units in all care homes within the next 10 years. In the Express, the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch criticises Sir Keir Starmer, stating rising energy costs are another failed Labour promise. The Eye looks at what Andy Burnham might do if he manages to claim the top job, speculates about who would join his cabinet, suggesting cabinet ministers are already wooing him. Daily Mail looks at what it claims are Andy Burnham's views on single-sex spaces. The Mirror leads with Kylie's cancer battle, saying that the star had the disease for a second time. And the Star asks us what came first, the chicken or the 3D egg after birds hatched from man-made eggs. So let us talk more. And in fact, a number of the newspapers, Adam, are leading on the potential for a cap on staple food prices. The request coming from the Treasury is the suggestion.
Yeah, and this clearly is playing to the number one political issue at the moment, which is the cost of living. And the government, which, as we know, is under all sorts of pressure, wanting to be seen to be doing something and talking about talking to the supermarkets to see if they can freeze milk, egg and bread prices. The problem, I think, with this is that if the government gets into trying to coerce and interfere in the markets, most people would say that that normally tends to end in tears. And also, I think the supermarkets, because of competition between them, on things like staples, they do try and keep the price down in any case. So it's a bit of a kind of redundant gesture. And the newspapers are suggesting that the government is going to say, well, we'll give you a break and we won't clamp down so much on unhealthy foods, or we won't insist that you have environmental packaging. Well, you know, so that's giving up one principle to try and get some sort of political success elsewhere.
Yes, to be seen to be doing something, one might argue. And the Times, for example, suggests the SNP has announced plans for compulsory price caps in Scotland. This is voluntary, a bit of quid pro quo, as Adam was explaining there, which would limit the price of up to 50 essential items, including bread, milk and cheese. Is this a slippery slope, do you think, towards price caps across the board, for example, on rents, as well as these staples?
Well, I think it's very far from that. I think what the government are trying to do here are thinking, if we give supermarkets a break on some of these new regulatory measures that are coming in, that will save them money. How can we ensure that they pass those savings directly onto consumers? Well, perhaps getting them to voluntarily sign up to price caps is the way forward. So that, I think, is the economic thinking here, and the government will be thinking very much about the retail offer. So how can the public see that it's we, the government, who are doing things to keep the price of food low? You can understand it from a political perspective. I guess what economists would question here is this the best way of giving supermarkets basically a price saving and then trying to ensure that it ends up in the pockets of consumers rather than profits to shareholders? Now, supermarkets would say, we have very lean profit margins, and I think on some of these goods, it's true they do, but, you know, you earlier read out the profit figures from Tesco.
Yes.
Very healthy profits made last year, so...
I read out pre-tax profits, to be fair. 8.5% rise in annual pre-tax profits to £2.4 billion and revenues of £66 billion. But, you know, pre-tax, just bear that in mind.
And supermarkets themselves would say margins are very, very tight. There's not a lot to give here. And there are fundamental economic factors that are pushing the cost of food up.
Well, the Financial Times tells us that the supermarkets are furious. I mean, they would argue, and so would farmers, that already the margins for them are unbelievably tight. Farmers have long complained that they don't get paid properly for milk, for example. The Treasury asked supermarkets to cap prices on staple foods. It's also the lead story as well for the Daily Telegraph too. So, you know, many newspapers have picked up on this, and certainly, you know, there we go. Reeves tells shops to cap food prices. We've chopped up half the Telegraph there, haven't we? I was a bit confused what the paper was. You know, we'll see where this goes and what the supermarkets perhaps tell us tomorrow. But Adam, your thought on this, because I'm sure Burnham was starting to talk
it's
about
been
price
proven
controls.
as a headline grabber.
Yes, indeed.
And at a cynical level, if supermarket prices don't go up as much as people think they're going to go up, and the government can say that we've done something about it, that could be a political dividend.
But it's always a tricky thing, isn't it, that if prices are going to go up and they still go up, they just don't go up as much as they would have done otherwise. Sort of the same with the energy price cap, which is that the public may not actually give you credit anyway, because as far as they're concerned, the prices are still going up and they don't know what the counterfactual would have been.
Yeah. So let's move on to the politics of the day, shall we? The Eye suggesting already that cabinet ministers are wooing Andy Burnham, but the Guardian shows us a picture of Angela Rayner heading into number 10 Downing Street for a summit or a meeting on the Renters' Rights Act. So, I mean, what relationship does she have with Keir Starmer, Adam, do you think?
Well, we understand that when Wes Streeting resigned, that she was approached as to whether she wanted to come back into the government as Health Secretary, and she turned that down. We would read into that, presumably, that she thinks that perhaps this government's not going to last that long. She also, of course, before the decision of the NEC to allow Andy Burnham to stand as a candidate, and he's now been selected, she said that she would welcome that. She wanted to see Andy Burnham come back. So, I mean, my feeling is that, and remember, she comes from the same part of the world as Andy Burnham, and my feeling is that she is sending the signal that she's on board for, an Andy Burnham premiership, and she would play some role in that, rather than, as has been talked about, actually putting her own name forward to fight against him if it comes to a leadership contest. That would be the interpretation of what we're seeing, although that is all interpretation. We're told that she was in number 10 to discuss the recent Renters' Rights Act.
Yeah. Yes, because she was former, housing secretary, wasn't she, before her stamp duty episode, put it that way. And just as we finish this politics section, The Times is suggesting that allies of Keir Starmer suggest he might still be in Downing Street in the new year. Just leave you with that thought. It's at the top of the paper. Plenty more coming up from the newspapers in just a moment. Back in a sec.
urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict.
The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Well, we're taking a look at the newspapers with Sonia and with Adam. And Adam, let's go to the HS2 story, shall we? Set to be slower, more expensive and more delayed. All good news then in the paper, the Eye.
Yeah, this was a statement by Heidi Alexander, the present Trade Transport Secretary, basically saying that it's all gone wrong and it was all the fault of previous Conservative governments. Factually, HS2 was set up by a Labour government in 2009, and a lot of people are saying that the concept then of going for this ultra-high-speed train was the wrong one, and it's now been climbed down from. But to me, it just seems extraordinary that something announced in 2009 is only going to come into full operation in the 2040s, and that is even with cutting out basically half of the lines that were meant to go
and costs more than doubling.
That were meant to go on to Manchester and Leeds.
Yeah, and this piece of analysis in the Eye paper's got a couple of interesting statistics, which is that since 2010, so around the time of the inception of HS2, Spain has laid about 1,500 kilometres of high-speed lines in the time that we've ballsed up one line. Obviously, it's many kilometres. And the Panama Canal was built in 10 years back in the day. So doesn't that put things into context?
No, you're making me too
But it is all of those are less populated areas where you could cut through and you didn't have people protesting about what the concept.
You're punching through major conurbations, you know, with properties destroyed, bridges destroyed, ecological, you know, tests going on everywhere. Anyway, let's go to Cheer. Back pages are absolutely full of top guns. Who are we talking about? Of course, it is, of course, Arsenal, Premier League champions. But this story is also on the front pages as well, which is Southampton kicked out for spying. That's one of the pictures there, isn't it? Chucked out of the Championship playoff final for spying on Middlesbrough. And the Teessiders will now take on Hull for a place in the Premier League.
So apparently Southampton, someone from Southampton has said, well, this is within the rules on the continent. So they didn't know it was outside of the rules here. But I'm not sure when, you know, this is sort of world-class football, I'm not sure that that's much of an excuse. I feel very bad for Southampton fans. I've got a friend who's a Southampton fan, Rishi Sunak. Our former Prime Minister is a big Southampton fan. Lots of them were very, very excited about going to see this game, which I understand is the richest game in football, in world football, because if you win the Championship playoff, you get a guaranteed spot in the Premier League, and that leads to, I learnt all this tonight, lots of advertising revenue.
Yeah. Well, he suggested it's worth 100 million.
Yes, exactly. So lots of Southampton fans were super excited about going to see this game at Wembley this weekend, and they're not going to see it. So they are feeling the opposite of Arsenal fans.
Yeah, exactly so. But they also admitted to spying on Oxford ahead of their fixture in December 2025 and Ipswich before their game last month as well. So
and they're also having 4 points docked at the start of the next season.
Oh,
so
dear.
It does seem to me pretty tough punishment, to be honest.
Shall we have a look at the front of the Daily Telegraph, which pictures the 3 new Strictly Come Dancing hosts? It takes 3 to tango.
That's right. So the new hosts are going to be Josh Widdicombe, who's, of course, a comedian, Emma Willis, a television presenter, and Johannes Radebe, who used to be a professional dancer on the show. So they're going for a different look, 3 people instead of 2 people. Let's see, but I'm sure it's going to be very fun.
All I can say is at a time when the BBC is going on about having to cut staff to go from 2 to 3 presenters seems...
They're probably not paid as much.
No, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem a great PR move. And I also say that, you know, as I understand it, I don't watch this programme, but as I understand it, it started with Bruce Forsyth and a woman presenting it. Then it moved to 2 women. if you want to
done, Adam.
if you want to keep the formula going, having two blokes and a woman doesn't seem to me to make sense.
OK.
The problem is there's just...
we need to move on. Apologies, because I want to get to this one, which we didn't see last hour as well. It is the must-have fashion accessory of the year. Some people aren't prepared to form an orderly queue. Well, this was the scene in New York. Take a look at this, where police used pepper spray after a rowdy mob tried to burst into a Swatch store. The watchmaker Swatch. In the end, 4 people arrested, which ended their hopes of getting their hands on one of a special edition pocket watch. It sells for around £300. And this wasn't a one-off. Similar scenes were reported at Swatch stores around the world. Swatch has defended its launch, saying the watches will be available for several months. Why do people want a pocket watch so much? Can we see a picture of the pocket watch? It's coming, apparently, yes.
Yes, well, it's interesting, isn't it? I think Swatch is going to be incredibly happy because it's across all the news channels for this launch, which led to these scenes in New York and elsewhere. I remember when Swatches were a very cool thing to have when you were a teenager, and you could get them with all these different straps.
That's the new stuff, though.
Yeah. Well, I like the ones with the straps. I think they're a bit more useful.
I mean, I have to say, I just think Swatch has been the most brilliant success. It was launched by a sort of consortium, a Swiss consortium, when they were worried about losing markets to Casio and all the rest of it, and they've kept it going.
Brilliant design.
Well, there you are. You're going to continue the cues, aren't you? Adam, Sonia, thank you. We've got the sport next. More on Arsenal, of course.
OK, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, sir.
Let's go. Watch, wait. Right, we're going to get in. Right, get in. Get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them, quite often, is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Whoa. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera. Turn around and go away.
Okay, but
listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
That is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation. We lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood has rallied around her.
It's
that's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
Plenty of sport around tonight. Let's get all the details. Here's Matt.
How would you describe James Milner, the person?
Boring.
I went there probably thinking the same as everyone else, the boring James Milner, anything but
dry English humour.
He's always the last man standing on a night out.
He's got another side to him.
Doesn't drink, but he's there to the end. If you leave early, you're getting stick.
Obviously the parody account got set up.
He was one pre-season, it came out. Whoever it is, we still don't know.
He countered that, didn't he? Unassuming, humble, great fun, great to be around, incredible company.
A very unique player and a unique person.
James is a wonderful player, an outstanding footballer, but players get linked consistently here.
He knows what the club thinks about him, and we will wait for his decision.
I had 2 years left, and I was looking to stay at the club when the contract didn't come, and then eventually a contract came, and it was effectively a pay cut. You know, in the end, the club offered something which was probably at the time when I'd made my mind up was right at the end, whereas the mindset originally was to stay. It got to a point and it was like, well, might be better off going.
I think at that time it would have been coming to the end of Steven Gerrard's time, hearing that James Milner was going to become available because he hadn't renewed with City. He was certainly, you know, right at the top of our list of key targets to go after. I got a phone call from Matthew who said James would like you to come out to his house and just spend some time with you, which I'd never kind of had that before. I'd met with players and agents, obviously for lots of different deals, but James was very keen that I went out and spent some time out at his house with him and Amy, his wife. And I felt like I and Liverpool Football Club were being interviewed by James.
I know how I'm going to be when I go there. I'm going to give absolutely everything to whatever club I'm playing for. I'm going to give them everything I have every single day on and off the field. For me, it's what's your intentions and what's the plan, and you know, you're saying this to get me there, but is this going to happen?
Rodgers has spent more than £70 million on transfers this summer. One player who's arguably impressed most on tour, though, didn't cost a penny.
I've been fortunate to play for a lot of big clubs in my career, and with that comes pressure, and that's what you want. You want to be playing at the top level with and against the best players.
Millie's such a good laugh around the dressing room, always one of the lads, but when it's time to be serious and time to work, and then he's on another level really, so he had a really good balance. He's very much black or white, to be fair.
He set the standards in training. I think I seen that from the first day I trained with him. He was the one that demanded standards. He was the one that if anyone wasn't quite at it, they would get told that they weren't. Every day that I trained with James Milner, I don't think he was ever below par.
We clicked at Liverpool. We both got an English mindset. We both want to work hard. We both enjoy running off the ball. I don't enjoy slide tackles as much as him.
He brought relentlessness. He was one of the reasons why, even when we went behind or we took a knock, that we would get back into the game.
He's like the Swiss Army knife of players, isn't he? You're always trying to add, you know, key pieces to the jigsaw, and I think over my
Well, that was the wrap. Thank you so much for watching. We've got all the top stories coming up here on Sky News. That, of course, includes Arsenal's win tonight. Mari will have the details on that. And the latest too on Iran, as Sky News pushes the Americans to talk about that strike on a school in southern Iran.